Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pyromancer here, and welcome back to my channel. Hope you're all having a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. I know I am. This is Olive, and she is my new puppy. My girlfriend and I went and picked her up yesterday, and she is a whippet, which if you guys don't know what a whippet is, in terms of a dog, it's kind of like an Italian greyhound, which is like a small greyhound, mixed with a greyhound. It's just like a medium-sized little greyhound. But she's a little sleepy right now, huh? She's brindle and white, and she is the cutest thing in the universe. Oh, aren't you, huh, baby? Okay, I'm gonna set you back down. And right back to sleep she goes. She is 8 weeks old, and she is an angel. Literal angel. Most amazing thing ever. She's so smart. She's already playing fetch. She's already going potty outside on the lawn. Thank God. And she's been really good so far. It was a 6.5 hour drive home with her in the car. She only whined like 10 minutes of the entire way, so not bad, if I do say so myself. But today, you guys, I wanted to talk to you guys about the curse of flesh. And how it relates to the Titans and the old gods. And I just wanted to get your guys' take on this because I've read this multiple times. I've read it on my stream. I've read it with other people that I speculate with, like one of my mods, Lumino, for instance. And a lot of the people that hear what I'm about to read to you are interpreting it the same way that I do. But our interpretation, I suppose, could be wrong. It's always something that you need to consider. We don't want to fall into the traps of confirmation bias. So, I'm going to read to you guys the dialogue from the Lore Keeper of Norgannon. And this is an NPC that is found in Uldaman, which is a dungeon that was put into the game in Classic. This has been around since the very beginning of the game. And as some of you lore nuts may know, they have twisted and kind of altered the lore of World of Warcraft over the years. And while people seem to interpret this as the game being completely riddled with just absolute story-altering retcons and things like that, I would honestly tend to disagree. But regardless of that, because that's really a completely different conversation, the Lore Keeper of Norgannon has some interesting dialogue. You can actually speak right with this guy. And he's in the last room where you can access the discs of Norgannon. It's like the whole point that we go into Uldaman. Before we start, I want to talk about who Norgannon is. So Norgannon is the Titan Keeper of celestial magic and lore. And I don't mean he's a keeper, but he's like the Titan who is the keeper of celestial magics and lore. So he's a Titan, right? Like Aman'Thul, like Eonar, like Khaz'goroth, and so on and so forth. I do think, obviously, we should recognize that there's some pretty similar naming similarities between Norgannon and some of the Constellars, like Elegon, Algalon, Harboron, Norgannon. I don't think that that's coincidental. I think that Norgannon could very well be responsible for the Constellars, and could be responsible for their form, in a master of astral, celestial kind of magics. I'll let you guys see what he looks like here. So, he's also referred to as the Dream Weaver. If you guys did Antorus the Burning Throne, the last raid of Legion, you guys may recall that there's a mechanic on the Coven of Shivara fight where the torment of the Titans manifests as a mechanic that you have to deal with. With Khaz'goroth, he pops up and shoots fire across the middle of the room. With Aman'Thul, you get these ads that you need to kill before they finish their cast. But with Norgannon, you get the Dreamweaver, and he actually sends out copies of himself, and Magni says something along the lines of, "Mortals ain't meant to walk the Dreamweaver's path." And if you step into the ground where Norgannon is walking, you will instantly die. So that's pretty interesting. But I just want to throw out there, he's the keeper of celestial magics and lore. He's the lore keeper of the Pantheon. He is referred to in the RPG lore, Shadows and Light, as the greatest keeper of secrets in the universe. and he's also referred to as the Dreamweaver, a title that is for some reason, if I'm not mistaken, absent from Chronicle. But anyway, the Lore Keeper of Norgannon. This guy is an artificial intelligence stone watcher, right? He's basically, he's not animate in the sense that you and I are, not physically there. Let's read about it. Let's read this here. It starts off like this. Salutations. My function is to offer access to, and, when permissible, insight into informations regarding the Creator's synthesis of the earthen on the world designated as Azeroth. I am ready to share this information with you now at your leisure. The chat bubbles are us talking. That's us asking the question. Who are the earthen? The earthen are a synthesized race engineered by the creators, functioning as one of the seed races in the initial population of the world designated as Azeroth. The earthen were created to aid the creators' efforts in shaping the deep regions of this world. They are a modification of the standard subterranean being matrix, used on other worlds that the creators have seeded. The construction of this prototype race created various anomalies that were observed after initial synthesis. You continue to ask, what is a subterranean being matrix? It is one of the synthesis matrices the creators used when seeding a world. Each synthesis matrix is used to achieve the creator's goals. For Azeroth, a subterranean being matrix was modified to create a being with increased durability, with an affinity for deep region shaping. The earthen are the product of this modification. After the earthen had been put into service for the creators, unforeseen anomalies were discovered that affected their synthesis matrix due to high-stress environments. So before we go any further, it says here, the earthen are a synthesized race created by the creators of the Titans. We'll get more into that as we go along. They were a seed race in the initial population of the world. Now, if you guys refer back to Chronicle, it does say that the Titans went around and seeded myriad life across the planets that they had ordered. They were created specifically to aid the Titans' efforts in shaping the deep regions of the world. Well, what did the Titans put in the deep regions of the world? We know that that's old gods. They are a modification of the standard subterranean being matrix. So that is to say that the earthen, which are made of stone, and it's gonna talk more about that, they are a modification. They're not the standard subterranean being matrix, which means that the earthen dwarves, as we would refer to them, because they're dwarves, but they're not flesh, they're earthen. That's not what they normally use. Let's continue. Unforeseen anomalies were discovered that affected them due to high-stress environments. What do you suppose that is? What are the anomalies you speak of? Additional background information on the earthen must be given to you before this question may be answered properly. Processing. To understand the anomalies of the earthen, it is first important to understand what the earthen represent in their design intent. The earthen represent the creator's attempt at improving the survivability paradigm of the standard subterranean being matrix. This was done by incorporating a resilient foundation of construction inherent to the world into said matrix. So what this is saying is, you have to understand why they're designed the way that they are. The earthen, as a non-standard subterranean being matrix, was an attempt at improving the survivability of the standard subterranean being matrix. Thus, they were made out of foundation, resilient foundation, that is inherent to the world of Azeroth. So the Titans wanted the earthen to live better, right? They wanted them to have a higher survivability. A better way to do that is to make something out of stone. This is what it says. What is a resilient foundation of construction? It is the baseline material used in race synthesis. A cross-section of Azeroth's crust was used as the foundation for the earthen's synthesis rather than the typical biomass construction foundation used by the creators. Let me read that again. Cross-section of Azeroth's crust that was used for the earthen synthesis rather than the typical biomass construction foundation used by the creators. Research on the world's composition led the creators to theorize that an enhanced being could be synthesized that would epitomize the resiliency of this world's essence. This was accomplished by choosing to use a blend of Azeroth's various stone core components as the foundation. So what that's saying right there is the Titans said, wait. Instead of making it out of biomass, which if you were to ask me, that's flesh. We're going to get more into that. Instead of the typical biomass construction, they decided that because this world's essence is so resilient, something about Azeroth is incredibly resilient, that they would use a blend of her stone core compounds as the foundation for the construction of the earthen, which again is not the standard subterranean being matrix. Them being made of stone and the stone core components of Azeroth is not what they would have done on other worlds, regardless of whether or not it's Azeroth, right? They're typically biomass, as they are referred to as. So the earthen were made out of stone? Simply stated, this is correct. The earthen's physical features are that of a smaller stature humanoid, though their composition is that of Azeroth's various stone core compounds. Their design maximizes strength and stamina without sacrificing cognitive processing power. Their skin and musculature are nearly impervious to physical damage, and with very minor modifications, the earthen display a remarkable resiliency to unwanted magical forces. Their skin and musculature are nearly impervious to physical damage. What that's saying is, they are nearly invincible when it comes to being physically harmed, and remarkably resilient to unwanted magical forces. Wow. Okay. It's basically describing that they were making little immortal guardians. They were trying anyway. Anything else I should know about the earthen? It is integral to the assimilation of this data that it is understood that the creators wanted to synthesize a race that would long be an integral part of this world's development cycle after they had departed. This race would be instrumental in fulfilling the creators' long-term development objectives for Azeroth. As an ancillary note, the nomenclature earthen was deemed appropriate for the new race by the creators, based on the earthen's composition. I want to throw this out there. I think this is very interesting. They would long be an integral part of this world's development cycle. Magni fucking Bronzebeard? Does that remind anyone of that guy at all? Who is the designated speaker of Azeroth and was a dwarf and has basically kind of coaxed us along these last few things that have happened with Azeroth specifically. Not only going and taking action against the Burning Legion with his guidance, but also what happened in Silithus and how we're handling Azerite as a whole. It's being completely dictated by Magni and his relationship with Mother. That's pretty interesting, I think. It would be instrumental in fulfilling the creator's long-term development. So, I think I understand the creator's design intent for the earthen now. What are the earthen's anomalies that you spoke of earlier? The earthen's only anomaly in synthesis is the tendency for matrix destabilization when being used in high-stress environments. Listen to this. Addendum. Deep earth sculpting was naturally suited to the new matrix design and thus never met the qualifications of duplicating a high-stress environment. Destabilization was not discovered until well into the earthen's primary service cycle for the creators. The creators began to work on post-synthesis modification rather than recall and resynthesis. What high-stress environments would cause the earthen to destabilize? There is a noticeable pause after you ask this question. The information you request is not currently available in this repository. I sincerely apologize for this omission. Please request this information after a data cycling update has been performed on this information repository. You may also request this information from another information repository located on Azeroth. So listen to this. We are told that the curse of flesh, as what it's referred to as, comes from yogg-saron, and that yogg-saron is responsible for the spread of the curse of flesh all over Azeroth. But what we're reading here is contrary to that belief. What this is saying is that there is a stabilization matrix that is inherent within every single Titan forged construct, specifically the earthen. I'll keep it to the earthen for now, and that synthesis with this world resulted in their construction being primarily out of Azeroth's stone core compounds. But it's saying that the anomaly is matrix destabilization. It's not, think of it this way, it's not like they caught a disease and then they turned to flesh. And as it's saying here, destabilization was not discovered until well into the earthen's primary service cycle for the creators. So it wasn't until a long time after the earthen were actually created that any destabilization, as it's coined, actually happened. But instead of completely destroying the earthen, completely destroying all of it, recall and resynthesis, as it's referred to here, they began on post-synthesis modification. They tried to change the flesh back to something else. And when you ask what high-stress environments cause this, he omits the information. The information is not present on this record for a reason. More than likely because at this time, the old gods weren't like in your fucking face, but it was the old gods. The high-stress environment that they were subject to, they were never actually qualified in the duplication of, is presence of an old god, most likely. But remember, the anomaly in the earthen specifically caused destabilization, but they're also not the standard subterranean being matrix, which is typically comprised of biomass construction. I would conclude in this situation that it is of a living flesh-like state. And these environments cause them to revert to such a substance. Let's read more about this. What happens when the earthen destabilize? There are two potential results when the earthen synthesis matrix destabilizes. Initiating visual aid representation, number 1. The first variant matrix is a degenerative product of synthesis, hereby designated with the common nomenclature of Trog. This variant maintains strength and stamina comparable to the earthen, but its cognitive processing power has been almost completely compromised. Force of will and a strong sense of cunning are the only driving factors in the psyche of a Trog. So, think about this. The destabilization of this, due to synthesis, can result in either a dwarf or a Trog. The first that's mentioned here is a Trog. But they consider it a degenerative product, right? We're not moving up the ladder, we're degenerating down a little bit. You ever heard someone call someone a degenerate? So it's called a Trog. It still has strength and stamina. Force of will and a strong sense of cunning are the only driving factors in the psyche of a Trog. Almost like most natural living things on Earth. Having a strong force of will, humans are like that specifically, and a strong sense of cunning, it says it almost as though the two things that it has are like they're not good enough. It's cognitive processing power. Think of it like they designed a stone computer. But after it's destabilized, it turns dumb. The computer just turns dumb. So it's like Trogs aren't worthy because they got turned from like a computer processor inside of a stone body into something with a continued strong force of will and sense of cunning, strength and stamina. It's viewed as not good enough. It's a living thing that in time would probably evolve into something more grandiose, right? Like that's the whole thing with evolution, isn't it? Like we came from monkeys, right? So, but we don't consider monkeys as intelligent as we are, right? Because over time, like evolution led to things, to certain events unfolding, which would lead to the cognitive enhancement of a particular creature or being. But it's not considered that way here. Trogs. Are the Trogs you mentioned the same as the ones in the world today? I'm unable to process your chronological reference in comparison to the recording of this data. My apologies. He doesn't know how long it's been. The Trog retains some composition of Azeroth's various stone core components, but the loss of cognitive power makes this variant unacceptable to the creators. Listen to this. The Trog procreates as per a standard biomass. By default, it consumes stone and anything else it can acquire, including other Trogs. Cannibalism is considered unacceptable by the creators. See, we're learning more about the Titans here as well. If it's not smart enough, the loss of cognitive power makes this variant of an earthen unacceptable to the creators. The Trog procreates as per a standard biomass. Procreation, they have babies, right? Like a standard biomass. Once again, this takes us back to what I said at the very start when I pointed out the earthen is not like a standard subterranean being's matrix, which is generally constructed of biomass. Why on Azeroth did they do it differently? How come on other worlds were there beings made of flesh, and how come Chronicle doesn't fucking mention that? Chronicle mentions mortal civilizations, which in my opinion are inherently of flesh, because if you're not made of flesh, you're probably not mortal, right? And in some cases, like demons, for instance, you can still be flesh, but it's demon flesh, not mortal flesh, and you can be immortal. But the point that I'm trying to make is that the curse of flesh, as it's referred to as the curse of flesh, has existed far, far beyond the synthesis of these earthen on Azeroth. But being subject to the exposure and influence of old gods, presuming that the high intensity environments, high stress environments, was proximity to the old gods, then that makes what Chronicle says not fucking true. Assuming that this isn't telling you bullshit, which I don't know why they would go to these lengths. This was back in Classic, so it could have changed. But you mentioned 2 results when the earthen destabilize. What is the second? Initiating visual aid representation number 2. The second resultant variance of the earthen matrix retains many desired elements when compared to the standard subterranean matrix. The common nomenclature for this variant is dwarf. This variant retains strength and stamina inherent to the earthen. In some cases, the dwarf even exceeds the cognitive powers of the earthen's matrix. The dwarf, however, retains none of the physical composition of Azeroth's various stone core components. So, the essence of resiliency that is inherent in the earthen because of their Azeroth's stone core compound is completely lost because their physical composition is left as flesh. It's a dwarf. It's flesh. It's biomass. Right? Very similar to the Trog. And they procreate like a standard biomass, just like the Trog, just like other living beings. But they can be even smarter. Isn't that interesting? Something made of flesh, not built like a fucking computer, can actually become smarter than what the Titans had actually even originally created. So unless the Titans wanted this destabilization to happen, which I don't know how they would not have foreseen, to be quite frank with you, seems like we kind of give the Titans a lot of, they're kind of just dumb cards that we give them a little free pass of like, they're gods, but they're just fucking, they fuck up. They can see through time and like control life and death and chaos and fucking order and, all this stuff. But they're dumb. I can't get behind that. So you basically lose. Maybe, I don't even know if it's lost. Maybe it's converted. Maybe it's absorbed. Maybe that's why they're cognitively more capable than something like an earthen. But they are more vulnerable because they are in a flesh state. And remember, the earthen were initially created as an attempt to enhance the survivability paradigm of the standard subterranean being matrix. Therefore, the dwarf is likely, unless survivability is not measured specifically by physical composition, but also cognitive power, the dwarf would therein be less survivable than the earthen. But they are still accepted. Listen to this. Dwarves. Now you're telling me that dwarves originally came from the earthen? The data stored in this repository does indeed correlate with your astute proclamation. The dwarf maintains an affinity for the stone composition of Azeroth, but due to the high-stress environmental anomaly within within the earthen's synthesis matrix, the dwarf reverts to a default biomass composition as seen in the standard subterranean matrix. What this is saying is that the curse of flesh did not come from Yogg-Saron. Not only that, it didn't even come from the old gods in the first place as far as we know. But the old gods can cause high-stress environments that can cause an anomaly within the matrix already inherent within a Titan Forged and cause it to turn into flesh. It is not like a disease that they fucking caught. It is not the same thing. And I think that is a huge, huge point to make because the old gods are seen as like a writhing disease, mass, cancerous flesh, right? The perception of what something is very important to how it is treated. Let's move on here. Ergo, the dwarf variant does synthesize from the degeneration of the earthen creation matrix, as you inferred with your inquiry. So what that says is the dwarf itself is a successful synthesis from what they still consider a degeneration of the earthen creation matrix. So these dwarves are the same ones today, yes? Do the dwarves maintain any other links to the earthen? I am unable to process your chronological reference in comparison to the recording of this data. My apologies. Though the dwarf maintains most of the earthen's physical mental attunement to Azeroth's stone composition, the reversion back into living biomass remains the main degeneration of the matrix. Dwarves eat and procreate through means typical to other standard biomasses. The creators view the dwarf as an acceptable variant, worthy of genesis in its own right, because it stayed intelligent. Cunning, but not as survivable. Interesting. According to this thing, the Titans accepted what the dwarves were, even though they were made of flesh. Now Chronicles really making not a lot of fucking sense to me. Who are the creators? The creators are the creators. They are the beings that seeded and shaped this world by their own design. They are the reason for this world's existence, as well as many other worlds. They are the wellspring from which Azeroth flows. Interesting little section there. They're the beings that seeded and shaped this world by their own design. They are the reason for this world's existence. Without the Titans, the world of Azeroth, which Sylvanas and I believe is a prison, does not exist, as well as many other worlds. But according to Chronicle, worlds just popped up from the creation of the cosmos because of the clash of light and void, which caused terrible destruction and birthed planets somehow. Fuck me up, dude. Give me a break. I'm not buying that shit. They're the wellspring from which Azeroth flows. This is a lot to think about. The creators are cognizant of the magnitude of the information housed in this repository. The creators know what's in there. They know it's a lot to take in. Subsequently, a portable copy of the data stored here will be made available to you once you are attuned with the discs of Norgannon. Attunement. I find that interesting as well. Please consider your cursory requirements for the assimilation of this knowledge to be complete. At your leisure, access the discs of Norgannon to begin synthesis of your discs. I will access the discs now. So we're basically going to put into there what we've witnessed and what we've learned. Listen to this. Please consider your cursory, not very in-depth or short-mannered in general. That's what cursory basically means. Your not very in-depth or well-explained requirements for the assimilation of this knowledge to be complete. You've done enough. Doesn't take much for us to have this knowledge provided to us. If this is all true, what we know about the curse of flesh is bullshit. Because like I said, it isn't like a disease that was caught. It is due to high-stress environments on Azeroth specifically that led to the destabilization of the subterranean being matrix constructed in order to result in earthen and ended up leading to the creation of trogs and dwarves. And if I'm not mistaken, in order to halt this destabilization, they went to sleep in Uldaman. And going to sleep and going into a dreaming state halted their degeneration into flesh. So it's interesting that on one hand here, we're basically being told, Titans accept the dwarf. It is an acceptable variant. This is the difference between what it is in an earthen and what the point of the earthen was initially. Chronicle makes it seem like the Titan Forged, not even really the Titans, I guess it was really mostly the Titan Forged freaked the fuck out because they didn't really know what was happening to them. They considered it a curse. I don't know where the Titans' heads are at in any of this. I really don't at this point, because it's clear that biomass, living organisms made of flesh, exists on other planets and has for a long time. And the Titans were fully aware of that. But for some reason, we're just like led to believe that the curse of flesh comes from yogg-saron, and the Titans didn't know about it. No one fucking knew about any of this shit. And all of a sudden, the old gods created flesh. No. This has been a thing for a long, long time. I wanted to make this video for a while, but it's taken me a little while to get around to it. So let me know what you think, because this is a pretty big implications here. Not only about the curse of flesh, but the existence of Azeroth in general, because according to the lore keeper of Norgannon, The Titans are responsible for the existence of the planet Azeroth, which I think is fascinating. Because I don't believe that these worlds just pop up out of nowhere. I think the Titans craft them. I think they make them. Absolutely. Why not? These are gods that are bigger than our planet. Do you guys see Sargeras? From what we've seen, they're the most powerful beings in the universe. So far. I want to talk about that in another video. Why they are the most powerful beings in the cosmos. And I would love if you guys would join me for that video as well. If you liked this video, please do hit the thumbs up button down below. It's the best way to support my content. Let me know that you enjoy my content here on YouTube. And I appreciate you very much for it, guys. If we can get to 3,000 likes on this video, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. If you guys are new to my channel, please hit the subscribe button as we are nearing 80,000 subscribers. And my goal is 100,000. So share this video around, spread this, let people know about this, because I feel like this is fucking huge, right? Like, why isn't this something that's been talked about more? And let people know to come to my channel to find more content like this in the future. If you guys would like to, you can follow me over on twitch.tv/Pyromancer, where I stream sometimes, World of Warcraft, amongst other things. You guys can follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/PyromancerSarg, and I do tweet about lore things and also my cute dog. Oh, she's amazing. And the last thing, guys, you can go over to my Patreon, patreon.com/Pyromancer, and you can throw $1, $4, $10, whatever amount of money you want my way per month to help me pay the bills, help me make better content for this channel, get better equipment like this camera that I'm using for you guys today. I would really appreciate it. So thank you guys very much again for watching this video. I appreciate you very much. Stay awesome. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.